This video is about why men need solitude to grow stronger, sharper, and more grounded. The purpose is simple: to explain how intentional time alone builds clarity, discipline, confidence, and direction. Most men avoid solitude because it feels uncomfortable, but discomfort is where growth lives. If you want to become dangerous in a calm, controlled way, this matters. Subscribe to the channel if you want real information that actually makes you better. When the noise disappears, the excuses disappear with it. There is no crowd to impress, no messages to reply to, no dopamine hits to hide behind. Just silence in your own mind staring back at you. This is uncomfortable because most men are not afraid of hard work. They are afraid of facing themselves. In solitude, there is no mask. You cannot perform. You cannot pretend you are stronger, smarter, or more disciplined than you really are. Your habits become obvious. Your weaknesses stop hiding. Your fears speak louder because nothing is drowning them out. This is where most men run back to distraction. They scroll, they text, they chase validation, anything to avoid sitting with the truth of who they are and where they are failing. Solitude removes external blame. You cannot blame friends, society, women, your past, or bad luck. When you are alone, responsibility lands fully on your shoulders. And that pressure is exactly what forges growth. You begin to notice patterns: why you procrastinate, why you lose discipline, why you get angry or lazy or unfocused. These answers do not come in noise, they come in stillness. Solitude forces honesty. Honesty about your effort, honesty about your discipline, honesty about whether you are actually becoming the man you claim you want to be. This is the foundation of growth, because you cannot fix what you refuse to see. And you cannot see yourself clearly when you are constantly distracted. Strong men are built in isolation, not forever, but long enough to understand themselves, long enough to confront weakness, long enough to decide that comfort is no longer acceptable. If you avoid solitude, you avoid truth. If you avoid truth, you stay the same. And staying the same is the real failure. The world is loud, opinions are thrown at you from every direction. Expectations are placed on your shoulders before you even choose your path. Pressure to fit in, pressure to earn, pressure to chase what everyone else is chasing. And in that constant noise, most men are not thinking, they are reacting. Solitude cuts through that noise like a knife through fog. It removes outside voices one by one until only your own remains. And that is when clarity begins. You stop reacting emotionally, you stop jumping from impulse to impulse. You stop living on autopilot, and for the first time you start thinking with intent. In silence you can hear your real thoughts, not the borrowed ones, not the trends, not the fears planted by others, but the thoughts that come from your core. This is where priorities rearrange themselves. What truly matters rises, and what is fake loses its grip. Real decisions about your life cannot be made in chaos. Chaos creates rushed choices, weak commitments, and regret. Silence creates precision. In solitude, you can map your future without interference. You can evaluate your strengths, your limits, your direction without needing approval. Silence sharpens judgment like a blade on stone. Every moment alone refines your thinking, makes it cleaner, colder, more accurate. You begin to see consequences before they happen. You recognize distractions before they trap you. You sense bad paths before you walk them. Men who avoid silence stay confused. Men who embrace it gain vision. Clarity is not gifted. It is earned through stillness, discipline, the courage to sit alone with your thoughts long enough to understand them. When your mind becomes quiet, your direction becomes obvious. And once direction is clear, hesitation disappears. Men who cannot sit alone cannot control themselves. If you always need stimulation, you are owned by it, owned by screens, noise, people, habits, and impulses. Every urge becomes a command. Every emotion becomes an order. And your life turns into a series of reactions instead of deliberate choices. Solitude removes the escape routes. There is nothing to numb discomfort, nothing to distract you from what you feel. And that is exactly why it works. When you are alone, emotions rise to the surface without filters. Anger, frustration, fear, doubt, boredom, restlessness, all of it shows up. Most men are trained to suppress or explode. They either bury emotions until they leak out in destructive ways, or they let emotions drive their actions. Both are weakness. Solitude teaches a third path: observation. You feel anger without acting on it. You feel fear without running from it. You feel doubt without surrendering to it. This is where real control is forged. Not by pretending emotions do not exist, but by learning that they do not own you. You realize emotions are signals, not commands. They pass if you let them. They lose power when you stop feeding them attention and reaction. When you face anger alone, it weakens because there is no audience. When you face fear alone, it shrinks because there is no external pressure amplifying it. When you face doubt alone, it becomes information instead of paralysis. Over time, your nervous system hardens. You become harder to provoke, harder to shake, harder to manipulate. Stress no longer hijacks your behavior. Pressure no longer forces sloppy decisions. This is composure, calm under tension, stability under uncertainty, control under provocation. Men with emotional control do not need to prove themselves. They do not react to insults, chase validation, or crumble under stress. They move deliberately, speak less, and act with precision. Solitude is the training ground for this power. You sit with discomfort until it loses authority. You remain still until your mind obeys you. This is how a man becomes unshakable. Not loud, not aggressive, but controlled. And control is strength. History proves this again and again. The men who shaped nations, built empires, won wars, and changed the world all had periods of isolation. Thinkers, warriors, builders, leaders, they stepped away from crowds to think clearly and without interruption. Solitude gives space for deep thought, not surface-level reactions, not borrowed opinions, not emotional decisions, but slow, structured, ruthless thinking. When no one is watching, there is no performance. There is no need to sound impressive or appear confident. You are free to think honestly, and that freedom is rare. In noise, your mind skims the surface, jumping from idea to idea. In silence, it dives deep, connecting patterns, seeing angles others miss. Your best plans are not born in meetings or group chats. They are born in quiet moments when your mind has room to breathe and explore. This is where realizations hit you suddenly about your future, your mistakes, your next move, your true priorities. Strategy requires distance, distance from emotion, distance from distraction, distance from other people's expectations. Alone you can simulate outcomes, plan long-term, think in years instead of days. You stop asking what feels good now and start asking what wins later. No validation, no applause, no pretending, just pure thought. Sharpened by focus. This is where disciplined systems are designed. This is where life trajectories are redirected. This is where weak paths are abandoned and strong ones are chosen. Men who never isolate copy. Men who do create. Solitude is not loneliness. It is the workshop of greatness. This is where strategy is born, and without strategy, effort is wasted. Strength is misused, and potential dies unnoticed. When you choose to be alone instead of chasing approval, you send yourself a clear message that cuts deeper than words. You are telling your own mind, I am enough without an audience, without validation, without noise. Most men are addicted to being seen, liked, noticed, approved of, and that addiction quietly destroys self-respect because your worth becomes dependent on reactions you cannot control. Solitude breaks that dependency. When no one is watching and you still show up, still think, still plan, still train, still improve, you build internal credibility with yourself. And self-respect is nothing more than trusting your own word. Men who respect themselves do not beg for attention. They do not chase responses. They do not adjust their values to fit rooms. They move on their own standards, whether anyone notices or not. In solitude, you define those standards clearly: how you work, how you speak, how you handle pressure, how you treat others, how you treat yourself. There is no applause to motivate you, which forces a deeper reason to act. Discipline in isolation builds a quiet pride, not arrogance, not ego, but a grounded confidence. You know who you are because you have spent time with yourself without distraction. Self-respect grows when you keep promises that only you know. When you do the hard thing even though no one will ever praise you for it. Over time, this creates a man who cannot be easily shaken, manipulated, or led astray. Approval loses power. Insults lose power. Trends lose power. You stop asking, do they like me? And start asking, do I respect myself? Solitude turns your standards inward. And once that happens, your identity stabilizes. A man with self-respect does not need constant company. He carries his value with him. This is why solitude is not weakness. It is proof of strength in the forge where self-respect is hardened. Most bad habits are social late nights that start with just one drink, junk food eaten because everyone else is eating it, wasted hours spent talking about nothing, scrolling together, complaining together, escaping together. Discipline collapses fastest in groups because responsibility is diluted and comfort is contagious. Solitude removes temptation at the root. There is no pressure to join, no need to explain, no one pulling you off your path. Alone, your environment becomes cleaner, quieter, more controlled, and discipline thrives in controlled environments. It becomes easier to train because there are no excuses and no interruptions, easier to read because your attention is not being fragmented, easier to work because focus is not constantly reset, easier to reflect because silence allows honest evaluation. In solitude, routines lock in sleep, improves habits, stabilize momentum, builds. You stop negotiating with yourself because choices become simpler. Isolation is not weakness. It is structure, a self-built framework that supports consistency. Athletes, entrepreneurs, strategists all understand this. Progress requires separation. When you are alone, time stretches. You regain hours that used to disappear. Discipline is not about motivation. It is about removing friction, and solitude does exactly that. You begin to enjoy the process because your mind is no longer overstimulated. Small daily wins stack quickly, creating confidence and forward motion. Men who avoid isolation stay busy but stagnant. Men who embrace it move quietly and advance steadily. Solitude turns discipline from a battle into a system, and systems outperform willpower every time. Sitting alone with your thoughts is not easy. The mind resists silence because silence exposes everything. You try to avoid regrets, fears, doubts, unanswered questions. That resistance is the training. Most men escape discomfort the moment it appears. They distract, numb, argue, or run. And every time they do, their tolerance shrinks. Solitude forces you to stay. You sit with boredom without stimulation. You sit with anxiety without reassurance. You sit with uncertainty without instant answers. At first it feels heavy, then unfamiliar, then gradually manageable. You learn that discomfort does not kill you, it sharpens you. Staying calm while uncomfortable rewires your nervous system. It teaches patience, restraint, and emotional endurance. This transfers directly to real-life pressure, stress, confrontation, competition, and uncertainty. When chaos hits you, do not panic, because you have practiced stillness under internal pressure. When conflict arises, you do not explode or freeze, because you have faced tension alone. When stakes are high, you remain grounded because your mind has learned not to flinch. A man who survives solitude survives anything, because solitude is pressure. It builds internal toughness, the kind that does not need to prove itself. Over time, discomfort becomes familiar, and familiarity removes fear. You begin to lean into hard situations instead of avoiding them. This is why the strongest men are calm, not loud, not reactive. Solitude trains you to endure without collapsing. And endurance is the foundation of resilience, power, and long-term success. Not everyone in your life deserves access to your energy. Not every voice deserves a vote. Not every opinion deserves weight. Not every relationship deserves your time. Most men are drained because they allow constant intrusion. They respond to every ping, every drama, every demand, and their own priorities vanish in the noise. Solitude creates distance, and distance creates perspective. The further you step back, the clearer the patterns become. You see who adds value, who consumes energy, who distracts, and who supports. In silence, you realize some goals were never yours. They were inherited from parents, friends, society trends, and the pressure to conform. You stop chasing borrowed dreams and start chasing what actually matters. You stop living other people's expectations. The pressure to appear successful, to fit a mold, to prove something dissolves, because no one is there to impress. Alone, you reconnect with your own values, your own standards, your own vision. Purpose becomes clear because clarity is born from space, away from the crowd, away from constant comparison, away from noise. You begin to prioritize relentlessly, because you see the difference between essential moves and shallow distractions. Social media, gossip, trivial debates, and endless chatter lose power because they no longer reach you. Decisions that used to feel heavy become simple because your focus is on
alignment.
not approval. Goals sharpen, energy consolidates, and actions gain momentum. Solitude is not isolation, it is optimization. It is a tool to filter life's clutter and amplify what truly matters. The man who masters solitude knows which battles to fight, which people to engage, and which paths to abandon. Purpose is no longer a vague idea. It is a living map built in the quiet, where distractions cannot follow. Solitude is not about escaping the world or hiding from responsibility. It is about stepping away to recharge, to analyze, to strengthen, so that when you re-enter life you do so as a refined force, not a reactive one. Most men isolate out of anger, frustration, or fear, and they return bitter, carrying resentment and weakness with them. But the strong man isolates intentionally. He leaves temporarily to return stronger. In solitude he clears mental clutter. He aligns his thoughts with his values. He sharpens focus and practices patience. He observes his emotions instead of being ruled by them. And every uncomfortable thought faced alone becomes a lesson in control. When he returns, he carries calmness like armor. He no longer reacts impulsively to provocation or drama. His confidence is quiet but palpable. He no longer seeks validation or approval, because he has reinforced it internally. He speaks less, but every word has weight because his actions and discipline have earned attention. He no longer fills silence with noise. He moves with certainty because decisions have been considered in isolation. He has rehearsed outcomes in his mind without interference from others' opinions or pressures. Stress, confrontation, failure, and criticism hit him, but they no longer break him because he has endured internal tests alone. The world does not shake him because solitude has taught him resilience, patience, and strategic thinking. Men who return bitter carry the chaos of distraction with them. Men who return better carry focus, power, and clarity. Solitude is not retreat, it is preparation. It is the forge that tempers men into strength without arrogance and influence without neediness. Strong men use solitude to calibrate themselves so that when the world demands action, they deliver results instead of excuses. Solitude is powerful, but it is not an end in itself. It is a means to an end, a tool to sharpen the mind, strengthen the spirit, and refine the man you are becoming. Too much isolation can make a man cold, distant, disconnected from reality. It can erode empathy and social intelligence, leaving him strong alone but weak among others. Too little isolation, on the other hand, keeps a man shallow, distracted, reactive, and dependent on external validation. He never meets himself. He never builds internal authority. The balance matters because life requires both inner strength and the ability to operate in the world effectively. Use solitude intentionally to recharge your energy, to think deeply, to plan carefully, to reflect honestly on your actions and habits. Step away from noise, interruptions, and external pressures long enough to gain perspective and clarity on who you are and what you are building. Train in solitude, practice discipline in silence, face discomfort without running, and observe your thoughts without judgment. This is where character is forged. Then when the mind is sharp, the body disciplined, and the emotions under control, re-enter the world deliberately. Engage with people confidently, without neediness. React strategically, instead of emotionally, and pursue goals with direction instead of distraction. Solitude becomes a springboard, not a cage, a preparation ground, not a retreat, a source of power, not an escape. The man who masters this balance is both grounded and capable. He knows when to step back and when to advance. He does not fear stillness, because he has learned from it. He does not fear interaction, because he is strengthened with it. In essence, solitude is a forge. It tempers, it clarifies, it strengthens, but it is meant to be used, not abused. Use it well and you emerge not only stronger but wiser, more resilient, and fully prepared to take on life on your own terms. If you take nothing else from this, remember this. Solitude is where you sharpen yourself. Avoiding it keeps you average. Embrace it and you grow. Subscribe if you want more real guidance that cuts through nonsense. Use this knowledge and build yourself properly.